The white silk of Helena Kensington's wedding dress hung heavy with the weight of humiliation. As she stood alone on the weathered steps of the chapel of St. Mary in Gonzales, Texas, her hands trembling while the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on that scorching June day in 1878. Behind those wooden doors, 27 guests sat in stunned silence, their whispers cutting through the humid air like the buzz of angry wasps, while the preacher shifted uncomfortably at the altar, his Bible growing heavier with each passing minute that brought no groom. Helena clutched the wilting bouquet of wildflowers until her knuckles turned white, her blue eyes scanning the dusty Main Street for any sign of Thomas Hartley, the banker's son who had promised her forever just 3 months ago when he had gotten down on one knee in her father's parlor. But Thomas never appeared. Instead, the only figure that emerged from the shimmering heat was a tall cowboy astride a chestnut mare, his worn leather boots dusty from the trail and his dark hair curling slightly beneath a weathered Stetson. He drew his horse to a stop at the hitching post near the chapel, apparently intending to water his mount at the trough, when his brown eyes landed on Helena standing there in her wedding finery, tears streaming down her cheeks, creating trails through the powder her mother had carefully applied that morning. The cowboy dismounted slowly, his spurs jingling softly as his boots hit the ground. He was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and an expression that held both kindness and a world-weariness that came from too many nights sleeping under the stars. He tied his horse and approached the steps cautiously, as one might approach a wounded animal. "Madam," he said, removing his hat to reveal thick brown hair that stuck up slightly from the heat. "I do not mean to intrude, but are you all right?" Helena tried to compose herself, tried to summon the dignity her mother had drilled into her since childhood, but it crumbled like dried earth under a wagon wheel. "He did not come," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thomas did not come." The cowboy's expression darkened with understanding, and something that looked like anger on her behalf. He glanced toward the chapel doors, where faces now pressed against the windows, watching this latest development in what was surely going to be the scandal Gonzales talked about for years to come. "What is your name?" he asked gently. "Helena Kensington." "Helena," he repeated, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. "My name is James Ashford. I have been trailing cattle from San Antonio to Austin, and I stopped here merely to rest my horse." He paused, studying her face with an intensity that made her heart skip despite her misery. "But I cannot leave you standing here like this, with all those people watching and waiting for your pain to give them something to gossip about over their Sunday dinners." "What choice do I have?" Helena asked, her voice hollow. "I cannot go in there alone. I cannot face them." James stood silent for a long moment, his hat turning slowly in his hands as he appeared to wrestle with some internal decision. Then, with a conviction that surprised them both, he said, "You will not go in there alone. I will stand beside you." Helena's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I mean that if you need someone to walk you down that aisle, to stand with you before all those people so you do not have to bear this shame alone, then I will do it." His brown eyes met hers with such earnest sincerity that she felt something shift in her chest, some small crack in the wall of her devastation. "I am just a drifting cowboy with nothing but my horse, my gear, and whatever wages I can earn. But I know what it is to be abandoned, and I would not wish that feeling on anyone, especially not a woman who clearly deserves better than a man who would leave her waiting." The absurdity of it struck Helena then. This complete stranger, this dusty cowboy who had ridden into town not 10 minutes ago, was offering to stand beside her in her moment of greatest humiliation. It was madness. It was improper. It was everything her mother would consider scandalous. And yet, As she looked into James Ashford's face and saw nothing but genuine compassion, Helena found herself nodding. "Are you certain?" she asked, needing to hear him confirm it. "As certain as I have ever been about anything, madam." Helena took a shaky breath and squared her shoulders. "Then I accept your kindness, Mr. Ashford, though I do not know how I will ever repay it." "No repayment necessary," James said, offering her his arm. "Sometimes people just need someone to stand beside them. That is enough." Together they climbed the remaining steps to the chapel doors. Helena could feel the solid strength of his arm beneath her trembling fingers, could smell the leather and sage and dust that clung to him, scents so different from Thomas's expensive cologne. When they pushed open the doors, every head swiveled toward them, and a collective gasp rippled through the assembled guests. Helena's mother, Margaret Kensington, rose from the front pew, her face a mask of horror and confusion. "Helena, what is the meaning of this? Who is this man?" But Helena did not answer. Instead, she walked down that aisle with James Ashford at her side, her chin lifted despite the tears that continued to fall. When they reached the altar, the preacher, Reverend Walsh, looked between them with bewilderment. "My dear child, I do not understand." "Where is Mr. Hartley?" "Mr. Hartley is not coming," Helena said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "He has made his choice, but I did not want to waste everyone's time or let them think that I am ashamed, even though he should be. This is Mr. James Ashford. He has agreed to stand with me today, not as a groom but as a friend, so that I do not have to face this moment alone." The chapel erupted in whispers, but James remained solid and calm beside her. Reverend Walsh cleared his throat, clearly unsure of the protocol for such an unprecedented situation. "Well," the Reverend said slowly, "I suppose we can say a prayer for you, my dear. God's grace extends to all circumstances, even those as unusual as this." As Reverend Walsh began to pray, Helena felt the weight of the day begin to lift, just slightly. When he finished, she turned to James, studying him properly for the first time. He had strong features, honest features, and eyes that held depths she suddenly wanted to understand. "Thank you," she whispered. "You did not have to do this." "I know," James replied quietly, "but I wanted to." The guests filed out of the chapel in a buzzing mass of speculation and barely concealed excitement at having witnessed such drama. Helena's mother rushed forward, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Helena Marie Kensington, have you lost your mind? Bringing some strange man into your wedding, making a spectacle. What will people think?" "They will think that my daughter was abandoned by a coward and helped by a kind stranger," Helena's father, Robert Kensington, said as he joined them. He was a tall man with silver-streaked hair and a weathered face from years of running his ranch outside town. He extended his hand to James. "Robert Kensington, I thank you for what you did here today. Not many men would have shown such compassion." James shook his hand firmly. "James Ashford, sir, I only did what seemed right." Robert studied him with the assessing gaze of a man used to judging character quickly and accurately. "You said you were trailing cattle, looking for work." "Always looking for honest work, sir." "Then come by the Kensington Ranch tomorrow morning. We can always use another hand, especially one who shows the kind of character you displayed today." Robert turned to his daughter, his expression softening. "Helena, gather your things. We are going home." Helena nodded, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. As she moved to collect her bouquet from where she had dropped it on the pew, she felt James's presence beside her. "Will you really come to the ranch tomorrow?" she asked, not understanding why the answer felt so important. "I gave your father my word," James said, "and I keep my promises." Unlike some people, Helena thought bitterly, remembering Thomas's empty vows and pretty lies. That night, Helena lay in her childhood bed at the ranch, still wearing the wedding dress because she could not bring herself to ask for help removing it, and she could not manage the buttons alone. Through her window, she could see the bunkhouse where the ranch hands slept, and she wondered if James Ashford had found shelter for the night, or if he was camped somewhere under the stars with only his horse for company. Sleep would not come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Thomas's face from that morning when he had kissed her cheek and promised he would see her at the altar. Had he already known he would not come? Had he looked at her and felt nothing but the desire to escape? Her mother had barely spoken to her on the ride home, too mortified by the spectacle to form words. But her father had been kind, squeezing her hand once and telling her that any man who could not see her worth was not worthy of her tears. Still, the tears came. When morning arrived, Helena finally managed to remove the dress herself, her fingers awkward on the tiny buttons. She folded it carefully, this symbol of her foolish dreams, and placed it in the bottom of her wardrobe where she would not have to look at it. Then she dressed in her usual calico day dress, braided her hair, and went downstairs to help with breakfast, desperate for any routine to anchor herself. Her mother stood at the stove, her movements sharp and angry. "Your father has gone down to speak with that drifter. I cannot believe he actually offered him work. Bad enough that you humiliated us all yesterday without now having that man around as a constant reminder. He helped me, Mother. He showed me kindness when I needed it most. He is a stranger. We know nothing about him. For all we know, he could be a thief or worse." "He could be," Helena agreed quietly. "But he is not. I could see it in his eyes." Margaret turned to face her daughter, her expression softening slightly. "Oh, Helena, you have always been too trusting, too romantic. Look where it got you yesterday." The words stung because they held truth. Helena had trusted Thomas, had believed his pretty words and his promises of a comfortable life. She had been a fool. "Then perhaps it is time I learned to trust my own judgment instead," Helena said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. Before her mother could respond, her father entered through the kitchen door, and behind him came James Ashford, looking freshly washed though his clothes were still trail-worn and dusty. "Helena," her father said cheerfully, apparently determined to move past yesterday's disaster. "Mr. Ashford is going to be working with the horses primarily. I understand he has quite a talent for training." James met Helena's eyes briefly, a question in his gaze as if asking if she was all right. She nodded slightly, and something in his expression eased. "Mrs. Kensington," James said, removing his hat and addressing Helena's mother with perfect courtesy. "I want to thank you for allowing me to work here. I will not give you any reason to regret your husband's kindness." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line, but she managed a curt nod. "Breakfast will be ready shortly. You may eat with the other hands in the bunkhouse." "Actually," Robert interjected, "I thought Mr. Ashford might join us this morning. I would like to discuss the work we need done with the Mustangs we brought in last week." The breakfast that followed was awkward, with Margaret's disapproval hanging over the table like storm clouds and Helena unable to meet James's eyes directly. But her father kept up a steady stream of conversation about the ranch, the horses, and the challenges they faced with drought threatening the grazing lands. James contributed thoughtfully to the discussion, demonstrating knowledge that came from years of hard work and careful observation. Helena found herself listening to the sound of his voice, deeper than Thomas's, with a slight drawl that spoke of time spent in southern Texas. "Where are you from originally, Mr. Ashford?" Helena asked, finally finding her courage. "Born in a little town outside Houston," James replied. "But I have not been back there in near 8 years. My parents both passed from yellow fever when I was 17, and there was nothing left to hold me there. Been drifting ever since, working ranches from the Gulf to the Panhandle. That must be a lonely life, Helena said softly. James met her gaze then, and she saw something ancient and sad in his eyes. It can be, but it is also free in its way. No one to answer to but yourself, no ties to hold you when you want to move on. And is that what you want, to always move on? The question hung between them, weighted with meaning neither of them fully understood yet. James set down his coffee cup carefully before answering. I used to think so. But lately, I have been wondering if freedom and loneliness are just different words for the same thing. Robert cleared his throat, breaking the moment. Well, you have a place here as long as you want it, son. Good men are hard to find, and I am grateful for your help. After breakfast, James headed down to the corrals where the mustangs waited, wild and untamed. Helena watched from the kitchen window as he approached them with slow, patient movements, speaking softly though she could not hear the words. There was something almost poetic in the way he moved, a grace that came from confidence and understanding. You should not watch him, her mother said from behind her. People will talk. People are already talking, Mother. They have been talking since Thomas left me standing on those chapel steps. At least if they are going to gossip, they might as well have something worth gossiping about. Margaret gasped. Helena Marie, that kind of thinking will ruin you. But Helena turned from the window with a new resolve hardening in her chest. I am already ruined in their eyes, am I not? Abandoned at my own wedding. So I might as well live my life as I choose, since I have already paid the price for impropriety I did not even commit. She left her mother standing there, shocked into silence, and walked out into the morning sunshine. The ranch spread out around her, familiar and comforting in its permanence. She had grown up here, had learned to ride before she could properly walk, had spent her childhood exploring every corner of this land. Then she had turned 18, and her mother had insisted she start attending social events in town, dressing her up like a doll and parading her before suitable young men. That was how she had met Thomas, at a church social 2 years ago. He had been everything her mother wanted for her. Wealthy, educated, respectable. But as Helena walked toward the corrals now, watching James work with the wild horses, she realized that Thomas had never made her feel the way she felt when she looked at this stranger. Thomas had never made her heart race or her breath catch. With Thomas, everything had been safe and planned and predictable, and he had still left her. James looked up as she approached, his hands gentle on the rope he was using to lead a particularly skittish bay mare around the enclosure. Morning again, he said with a small smile. Come to watch the show. I grew up around horses, Helena said, climbing up to sit on the fence rail. My father taught me to ride before I could remember. Used to drive my mother mad, coming in covered in dust and smelling of the stables. I cannot imagine you any other way than proper and perfect, James said, then seemed to realize how that sounded. I mean, you seem like the kind of woman who was meant for fine things, not ranch life. Helena laughed, but there was no humor in it. That is what my mother always said. That I was meant for better than this ranch, meant for society and tea parties and a big house in town. She was so happy when Thomas proposed because he promised her all of that. A mansion, servants, a place in high society. Everything she had always wanted for me. And what did you want? James asked quietly, his attention seemingly on the horse but his words directed at her. I thought I wanted what he was offering. Security, comfort, a life where I would never have to worry about anything. But now I am not sure I knew what I wanted at all. Maybe I was just trying to make my mother happy, trying to be the daughter she always imagined having instead of the one she got. James brought the mare to a stop and turned to face Helena fully. For what it is worth, I think the daughter she got is pretty remarkable. Not many women would have handled yesterday with as much grace as you did." "Grace," Helena repeated incredulously. "I was crying and humiliated. You were hurt and you had every right to those tears, but you held your head high anyway. That takes strength." Helena felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. "You barely know me, Mr. Ashford. How can you say such things?" "Because I know what it looks like when someone breaks and you did not break. Bend, maybe, but not break." He turned back to the mare, running his hand along her neck in soothing strokes. "This girl here, she is terrified. Been running wild her whole life, and now she is trapped in this corral with a creature she does not trust. But she has not given up. She is still fighting, still trying to find her way. There is courage in that." "Are we still talking about the horse?" Helena asked. James glanced at her with a hint of mischief in his eyes. "Maybe, maybe not." They worked together for the next several hours, though Helena knew her mother would have a fit if she knew. James showed her the techniques he used to gentle the wild horses, speaking to them in a low, constant murmur that seemed to calm even the most nervous animals. Helena found herself drawn into his world, fascinated by the patience and understanding he brought to each interaction. "Where did you learn all this?" she asked as they took a break in the shade of the barn, sharing water from the pump. "From an old vaquero named Miguel who worked a ranch I was at down near Lerdo. He taught me that horses are not so different from people. They want to trust, want to connect, but they have been hurt too many times. You have to show them slowly, patiently, that you are not going to hurt them, that you are worth trusting. And it always works." "Not always," James admitted. "Some wounds are too deep, some horses will never fully trust again, but most of them, if you are patient enough and kind enough, they will give you a chance. That is all anyone can ask for, really. A chance." Helena studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. She was acutely aware that she had known this man for less than a day, yet she felt more comfortable with him than she had ever felt with Thomas. It should have frightened her, this easy intimacy with a stranger, but instead it felt natural, as if they had been waiting their whole lives to find each other. "Mr. Ashford," she began, then corrected herself. "James, may I ask you something, anything? Yesterday, when you offered to stand beside me, why did you really do it? The truth." James was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "My mother," he finally said. "When my father died first, she was heartbroken, but the worst pain came from the way people treated her afterwards. Like she was somehow less because she was alone. Like his death diminished her worth. I watched her shoulders bend under that weight, watched her fade a little more each day until the fever took her too. And I always wondered if things might have been different if someone had stood beside her, reminded her that she was still valuable, still worthy, even alone." Tears pricked at Helena's eyes. "I am sorry for your loss." "It was a long time ago," James said, but his voice carried the weight of old grief. "But when I saw you on those steps, looking so lost and alone with all those people watching, I saw my mother. And I thought maybe I could do for you what no one did for her. Maybe I could remind you that you are not diminished by what he did, that you are still whole and worthy, regardless of his choice." Helena reached out and placed her hand over his, a gesture that would have been scandalous in any other circumstance, but felt perfectly right in this moment. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me." James turned his hand to clasp hers, his work-roughened palm warm against her softer skin. "Helena, I do not think anyone could look at you and not see you. You shine too bright to be invisible." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibilities, and the first tender shoots of something that felt like hope. Then the sound of approaching hoofbeats broke the spell, And they pulled apart as one of the ranch hands rode up with news that Robert needed James to look at a lame horse in the far pasture. As James left to attend to his work, Helena remained by the barn, her hand still tingling where he had held it. She was in dangerous territory, she knew. Her heart was raw and wounded from Thomas's betrayal, and it would be easy to mistake gratitude and kindness for something deeper. But as she watched James ride away, his posture easy and confident in the saddle, she could not help but wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, this was exactly what she needed. Not a rebound or a replacement, but something entirely new and unexpected. The summer days fell into a pattern after that. James worked with the horses, proving himself invaluable with his skill and dedication. Helena found excuses to be near the corrals, helping when she could and watching when she could not. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for futures they had not quite defined yet. Her mother remained coldly disapproving, but her father seemed pleased by the development, often arranging for James to take his meals in the main house and finding reasons for Helena and James to work together. Robert Kensington might have been protective of his daughter, but he was also a shrewd judge of character, and he saw in James Ashford a quality of honesty and integrity that Thomas Hartley had never possessed. 2 weeks after the failed wedding, Helena received a letter. Her hands shook as she recognized Thomas's handwriting on the envelope. She waited until she was alone in her room to open it, her heart pounding with a mixture of anger and something that might have been hope, though she hated herself for it. The letter was brief and cowardly. "My dear Helena, I hope this letter finds you well. I want you to know that my decision to not attend our wedding was not made lightly or with any intention to cause you pain. The truth is that I realized, perhaps too late, that I could not marry you. Not because you are lacking in any way, but because my heart has always belonged to another. Miss Sarah Willoughby and I have been secretly engaged for the past 6 months, and we were married yesterday in Austin. I know this news will cause you distress, and for that, I am truly sorry. Please understand that I did what I thought was best for both of us. You deserve someone who loves you completely, and I could not be that man. I wish you all happiness in your future. Respectfully, Thomas Hartley." The paper crumpled in Helena's fist as rage, hotter and cleaner than anything she had felt before, coursed through her veins. 6 months. He had been engaged to another woman while courting her, while proposing to her, while planning their wedding. Every kiss, every promise, every moment had been a lie, and he had not even had the courage to tell her to her face, choosing instead to humiliate her publicly before running off to marry his true choice. She was not sad. She was furious. Helena stormed out of the house, the letter still clutched in her hand, and headed straight for the corrals. James was working with a young stallion, but he looked up as she approached, his expression shifting from concentration to concern when he saw her face. "What happened?" he asked, immediately leaving the horse and coming to the fence. "He got married," Helena spat out, waving the letter. "Thomas got married. Yesterday. To a woman he has been engaged to for 6 months while he was courting me. He used me, James. He made me think I was going to be his wife while all along I was nothing but a distraction or a game or I do not even know what." James's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. "That sorry excuse for a man. Helena, I am so sorry." "Do not be sorry," Helena said fiercely. "Be angry with me. Because I am done being sad and humiliated. I am angry, James. I am so angry I could scream." "Then scream," James said simply. "You are on a ranch. No one is going to think twice about a little noise." Helena stared at him, then at the wide open spaces around them, and she did scream. She let out all the rage and hurt and humiliation in one long, primal yell that sent birds scattering from the nearby trees and made the horses skitter nervously in their enclosures. When she finally ran out of breath, she felt lighter somehow. Emptier, but in a good way, as if she had purged some poison from her system. "Better?" James asked, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Actually, yes," Helena admitted. Then, to her surprise, she started to laugh. "Is it terrible that I feel relieved, that now that I know the truth, I feel free?" "No," James said seriously. "It is not terrible at all. He did not deserve you, Helena. He never did. And now you know it for certain. No more wondering what you did wrong or how you could have changed things. You did nothing wrong. He was just a coward and a liar." Helena looked at James, really looked at him, seeing not just the kind stranger who had helped her but the man he was. Strong and honest and true. A man who kept his promises and treated her like she mattered. A man who made her heart race and her breath catch and her world feel brighter just by being in it. "James," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I think I am falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, bold and terrifying and true. James went very still, his eyes searching hers as if looking for any hint of doubt or confusion. "Helena, you have been through a terrible experience. Your emotions are raw. Are you certain what you are feeling is not just gratitude or relief at moving past what happened with Thomas?" "I am certain," Helena said, moving closer to the fence that separated them. "Because the way I feel when I look at you is nothing like the way I felt with Thomas. With him, everything was comfortable and safe and planned. With you, I feel alive. I feel seen. I feel like myself for the first time in my life. Not who my mother wants me to be or who society expects me to be, but just me. And if that is not love, then I do not know what love is supposed to feel like." James vaulted over the fence in one smooth motion, landing beside her. He reached up to cup her face gently in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she had not realized were falling. "Helena Kensington, I have been in love with you since the moment I saw you on those chapel steps, looking so brave and so broken. And every day since then, I have fallen a little deeper. But I am just a cowboy with nothing to offer you but hard work and an uncertain future. You deserve so much more than that." "You are wrong," Helena said, covering his hands with hers. "You offered me the one thing that mattered when I needed it most. You stood beside me, and that is worth more than all the money and security in the world." James leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, but Helena rose to meet him. Their first kiss was soft and sweet and tasted of new beginnings. It was nothing like the chaste, proper kisses she had shared with Thomas. This kiss was alive, electric, full of promise and passion, and the kind of love that poets wrote about and singers sang songs about. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. "I am not going anywhere," he whispered. "I will stand beside you for as long as you will have me." "Forever, then," Helena said. "I will have you forever." The sound of someone clearing their throat made them spring apart. Robert Kensington stood a few yards away, his arms crossed, but his expression amused rather than angry. "Well," he said dryly, "I suppose I should have expected this development. You two have been dancing around each other for weeks." "Sir, I apologize," James began, but Robert held up a hand. "Do not apologize for making my daughter smile like that. I have not seen her truly happy in longer than I care to admit." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "But James, I need to know your intentions are honorable. Helena has already been hurt once. I will not stand by and watch it happen again." "My intentions are completely honorable, sir," James said firmly. I love your daughter, and I want to build a life with her if she will have me and if you will give us your blessing." Robert studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You have my blessing, but you have to survive telling her mother first, and that might be the bigger challenge." Margaret Kensington did not take the news well. When Helena and James, accompanied by Robert, told her that evening after dinner, she went pale and then red and then pale again. "Absolutely not," she declared. "Helena, have you lost your senses? You were jilted not a month ago, and now you want to throw yourself at some drifter. What will people say?" "I do not care what people say anymore, Mother," Helena replied calmly, though her heart was pounding. "I care about being happy. I care about being with someone who values me and respects me and loves me. James is all of those things. He is a nobody with nothing to his name." "He is a man of honor and integrity," Robert interjected firmly. "Margaret, I know this is not what we planned or expected, but I will not stand in the way of Helena's happiness, not when I can see that this young man makes her genuinely joyful." "But the scandal," Margaret protested weakly. "People are already talking." "Let them talk," Helena said. They were going to talk anyway. At least now they will have something worth discussing. It took several more weeks of Margaret's cold disapproval before she began to soften, but even she could not deny the change in her daughter. Helena bloomed like a flower finally given proper water and sunlight. She laughed more, smiled more, carried herself with a confidence that had nothing to do with pride and everything to do with finally knowing her own worth. James courted her properly, despite the fact that they had already declared their love. He would arrive at the main house in the evenings, freshly washed and wearing his best shirt, and sit with Helena on the porch while her parents watched from inside. They would talk for hours about everything under the stars, sharing their pasts and weaving their futures together in words and dreams. One evening in late August, as the heat finally began to break and the first hints of autumn touched the air, James arrived at the house with something tucked in his vest pocket. Helena noticed immediately, her eyes drawn to the bulge in the fabric. "What do you have there?" she asked curiously. James pulled out a small wooden box, clearly handmade, the wood polished smooth and glowing in the lamplight. "I made this," he said, somewhat shyly. "I am not much of a craftsman, but I wanted to give you something meaningful." Helena opened the box carefully. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, was a ring. It was simple, made of silver with a small turquoise stone set in the center. Nothing like the expensive diamond Thomas had given her, which she had long since returned by mail. "It is not much," James said quickly. "I bought the stone from a trader passing through, and I made the band myself at the forge. If you do not like it, I can try again." "It is perfect," Helena breathed, tears springing to her eyes. "It is absolutely perfect." James took the ring from the box and dropped to one knee on the porch. "Helena Kensington, I know we have not known each other long by conventional standards, but I have loved you from the moment I saw you, and I will love you until the day I die. I do not have much to offer you except my heart and my promise to stand beside you through whatever life brings. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Helena said without hesitation. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." James slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had always been meant to be there. They kissed there on the porch, and this time when Helena's parents came out, drawn by their daughter's exclamation of joy, Margaret was crying too. "Well," Margaret said, dabbing at her eyes with her handkerchief, "I suppose if you are going to insist on this match, we should plan a proper wedding. Though perhaps a small ceremony this time, something quiet and dignified." "Actually," Helena said, looking at James with a mischievous smile, "I was thinking we could get married at the chapel in town, the same chapel where we met." "Are you sure?" James asked. After what happened there. I am certain, Helena said firmly. That chapel was where my old life ended and my new life began. Where I met you. Why would I not want to marry you there? We will take that place that holds such painful memories and fill it with joy instead. We will replace the bad with something beautiful. And so, on a crisp October morning in 1878, Helena Kensington walked down the aisle of the chapel of St. Mary for the second time. But this time, instead of uncertainty and misplaced hope, she walked with absolute certainty toward a man who truly loved her. James Ashford stood at the altar, his eyes never leaving hers, his expression full of such love and devotion that several people in the small gathering of guests wiped away tears. Robert walked his daughter down the aisle with pride, and when Reverend Walsh asked who gave this woman to be married, he said clearly and loudly, "Her mother and I do, with our blessing and our love." The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When James and Helena exchanged vows, they spoke words they had written themselves. James promised to stand beside her always, through good times and bad, through joy and sorrow, to be her partner and her friend as well as her husband. Helena promised to love him with all her heart, to build a life with him full of laughter and adventure, to never take for granted the gift of his love. When Reverend Walsh pronounced them husband and wife, and told James he could kiss his bride, the kiss they shared was full of promise and passion, and the kind of joy that comes from knowing you have found exactly where you are meant to be. The reception was held at the Kensington Ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed everyone in town. Even those who had gossiped most viciously about Helena's first failed wedding came to wish her well, and if some of them seemed disappointed that there was no scandal to report, Helena did not care. She danced with her husband, laughed with her friends, and felt happier than she had ever imagined possible. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, James pulled Helena away from the crowd, leading her toward the barn where they had spent so many hours together during their courtship. "Where are we going?" Helena asked, though she followed willingly. "I have one more surprise for you," James said. Inside the barn, tied with a big ribbon, stood a beautiful paint mare with intelligent eyes and a gentle disposition. Helena gasped, "James, she is gorgeous." "But we cannot afford such an expensive horse right now." "I did not buy her," James explained. "I have been training her for months, ever since your father agreed to let me have her if I could gentle her. She was one of the wild ones we brought in, the most skittish of the lot. But I saw something special in her, same as I saw something special in you. I wanted you to have a horse of your own, one that no one can ever take from you." Helena walked slowly toward the mare, extending her hand. The horse sniffed curiously, then nuzzled against her palm. "What is her name?" "She does not have one yet. I thought you should name her." Helena thought for a moment, then smiled. "Hope. I will name her Hope because that is what you gave me when I needed it most." "That is perfect," James said, wrapping his arms around his wife from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Just like you." They stood there together in the quiet barn, surrounded by the soft sounds of horses and the smell of hay and leather, and Helena felt a peace settle over her that she had never known before. This was not the life her mother had planned for her. It was better. It was real and honest and full of love. That night, as man and wife for the first time, James and Helena began their life together in the small house Robert had built for them on the ranch property. It was not large or fancy, just 3 rooms and a porch, but it was theirs. As they lay together in the darkness, Helena's head on James's chest and his arms around her, they talked about their dreams for the future. "I want to keep working with horses," James said, his hand stroking her hair gently. "Maybe eventually start our own breeding program." Your father said he would help us get started when we are ready. And I want to help, Helena said. I have always loved horses, and working with you these past months has reminded me how much. We could be partners in this, James. Real partners. I would like that, James said. I would like that very much. What else do you want, Helena? For our life, I mean. Helena was quiet for a moment, considering. I want a family. Not right away, maybe, but someday. I want children who grow up knowing they are loved, who feel free to be themselves instead of trying to fit into some mold that society expects. I want to raise them here, on this land, with the sky overhead and room to run. That sounds like a good life, James murmured, his voice growing sleepy. A very good life indeed. The seasons turned, and James and Helena Ashford settled into married life with an ease that surprised everyone, including themselves. James proved to be an invaluable asset to the ranch, his skill with horses bringing an additional income, as people from surrounding areas brought their difficult mounts to him for training. Helena worked alongside him, discovering that she had her own gift for understanding horses and their needs. But their partnership extended beyond their work. They were genuinely best friends, finding joy in each other's company whether they were working hard or simply sitting together on their porch watching the sunset. They talked about everything, disagreed sometimes but never with anger, and built a foundation of trust and respect that deepened their love with each passing day. Margaret slowly came around, especially after she saw how happy her daughter truly was. She still sometimes made comments about the life Helena could have had with Thomas, but those comments grew fewer and farther between, especially after word reached Gonzales that Thomas and Sarah's marriage was already foundering under the weight of his gambling debts and her sharp temper. "You dodged a bullet there," Robert told Helena one day as they worked together mending fence. "That boy was always weak, even when he seemed strong. You're James now, he has real strength. The kind that comes from character, not from money or position." "I know, Papa," Helena said, using the childhood name she had not employed in years. "I am very lucky." "We all are," Robert replied. "He is a good man and he makes you happy. That is all a father can ask for his daughter." In the spring of 1879, Helena discovered she was pregnant. She told James one evening after dinner, unable to contain her joy any longer. He lifted her off her feet and spun her around, laughing with pure delight before carefully setting her down as if she were made of glass. "Are you sure?" he asked, his hands on her shoulders. "The doctor confirmed it today when I went into town. We are going to have a baby, James, in the autumn, around October." James pulled her close, holding her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "We are going to be parents," he whispered. "Helena, you have given me everything. A home, a purpose, a love I never thought I would find, and now a child. I do not have words for how full my heart feels right now." "Then do not use words," Helena said, reaching up to kiss him. "Just love me." "Always," James promised. "I will always love you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Helena continued working with the horses for as long as the doctor said it was safe. James was constantly worried, hovering over her like a mother hen, which Helena found both endearing and occasionally frustrating. "I am pregnant, not made of porcelain," she reminded him when he insisted on carrying a bucket of water that she was perfectly capable of carrying herself. "I know," James said sheepishly, "but I cannot help it. You are carrying our child, Helena. That is precious beyond measure." On a cool October evening, as the leaves turned gold and red, and the air carried the promise of winter, Helena went into labor. James rode like the devil himself, was chasing him to fetch the doctor from town, then paced outside the bedroom where Margaret and the doctor attended to Helena, wearing a path in the porch boards with his anxious steps. When the baby's first cry pierced the night, James stopped mid-stride, his heart in his throat. A moment later, the door opened and Margaret emerged, smiling despite her exhaustion. "You have a son," she told him. "A healthy baby boy, and Helena is doing well." James did not wait to hear more. He rushed into the room where Helena lay propped against pillows, looking exhausted and radiant and more beautiful than he had ever seen her. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was the tiniest person James had ever seen, with a scrunched-up red face and a surprising amount of dark hair. "Helena," he breathed, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "You are amazing. He is amazing. We have a son." "We have a son," Helena repeated, her voice full of wonder. She looked up at her husband with tired but happy eyes. "Do you want to hold him?" James took the baby with shaking hands, cradling him awkwardly until Helena showed him the proper way. The infant opened his eyes, revealing dark blue depths that seemed to look right into James's soul. "Hello, little one," James whispered. "I am your papa. And I promise you, I will always stand beside you, just like I stand beside your mother. You will never doubt that you are loved." "What should we name him?" Helena asked. They had discussed names for months but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son, James knew exactly what felt right. "What about Joseph?" he suggested. "Joseph Ashford, we can call him Joey." Helena smiled. "Joseph, I like that. Welcome to the world, Joey Ashford. You are already so loved." The years that followed were full and rich with the kind of happiness that comes from hard work, genuine partnership, and deep, abiding love. Joey grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's brown eyes and his mother's bright smile. He took his first steps in the corral, chasing after a patient mare, and spoke his first word watching his father train a young stallion. In the spring of 1881, Helena gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Grace. She was the opposite of her boisterous brother, quiet and thoughtful, with James's dark hair and Helena's blue eyes. Joey was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to help care for her, though his idea of helping often created more work than it saved. The horse breeding program James and Helena had dreamed of became a reality, with people coming from as far away as San Antonio and Austin to purchase horses trained by the Ashfords. Their reputation grew not just for the quality of their horses, but for their integrity and fair dealing. James never forgot where he had come from, and he was always willing to help a young cowboy down on his luck, offering work and a chance to prove himself, just as Robert Kensington had once done for him. Robert himself grew older but remained active on the ranch, doting on his grandchildren and taking pride in the success James and Helena had built. Margaret mellowed with age and grandmotherhood, becoming the kind of grandmother who snuck candy to the children and told them stories about their mother's childhood, stories that often surprised Helena with their affection and nostalgia. On a warm June evening in 1883, James and Helena sat on their porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained since their marriage. Joey, now nearly 4, played in the yard with their dog, a mutt James had brought home as a stray. Grace slept peacefully in her cradle beside them, her tiny fist curled against her cheek. "You ever think about that day at the chapel?" Helena asked suddenly. "The first time we met, sometimes," James admitted, "though it seems like a lifetime ago now. If someone had told me then that in 5 years I would be sitting here with you, with 2 beautiful children and a life I love, I would not have believed them. That day was the worst day of my life at the time. I felt like my world had ended." "But it was really beginning," James said, reaching over to take her hand. His fingers found her wedding ring, the simple silver band with the turquoise stone, worn smooth with years of wear. "That was the day I found you, or you found me. I am never quite sure which it was. Maybe we found each other, Helena suggested. Two people who needed each other at exactly the right moment. I like that version, James said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it softly. Helena, I want you to know something. You have given me everything I never knew I needed. Before you, I thought I wanted freedom and solitude, but what I really wanted was this: home, family, someone to stand beside. You taught me that. Helena leaned her head on his shoulder, fitting perfectly against his side as she always did. And you taught me to trust my own heart instead of trying to be what others expected. You showed me that love is not about security or status or meeting society's expectations. It is about finding someone who sees you, really sees you, and loves what they see. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Joey chase fireflies that were beginning to appear in the gathering dusk. From inside the house, they could hear Margaret and Robert talking, their voices a comforting murmur of family and belonging. I am going to tell them the story one day, Helena said, nodding toward their children. About how we met. About how their father saw a woman in trouble and chose to help her, even though he did not have to. About how he stood beside me when no one else would. It will be a good story to tell, James agreed. Though I hope they never need to learn those lessons the hard way like we did. I hope they grow up knowing they are loved for exactly who they are. They will, Helena promised, because they have us as parents and we know what really matters. 2 more children followed in the years after Grace. In 1883, Helena gave birth to twin boys, Jacob and James Jr., who they called Jimmy to avoid confusion. The twins were a handful from the moment they entered the world, always getting into mischief and keeping their parents constantly vigilant. But they also filled the house with laughter and energy, and Joey and Grace proved to be patient and loving older siblings. The Ashford family became a fixture in Gonzales and the surrounding area. James served on the town council for several years, using his position to help pass fair labor laws for ranch workers, and ensuring that the growing town did not forget the men who built it. Helena started a small school on the ranch, teaching not just her own children but those of the other ranch families, believing strongly that education was the key to a better future. Their love story became something of a legend in Gonzales, often told by the older folks to the younger generation as proof that good things could come from bad situations, that kindness could change lives, and that true love was worth waiting for. The chapel where they met and later married became a popular place for weddings, with couples hoping that some of the Ashfords' happiness would bless their own unions. In the summer of 1892, on their 14th wedding anniversary, James planned a special surprise for Helena. He arranged for her parents to watch the children, now a rowdy group ranging from Joey at 13 to the twins at 9, and took Helena on a trip back to San Antonio, where he had been working when they first met. They stayed in a nice hotel, ate in fancy restaurants, and spent 2 days just being James and Helena instead of Mama and Papa. On their last evening, as they walked along the river, James pulled Helena close. "You remember what I said to you on those chapel steps?" he asked. "The very first thing I said," Helena thought back, trying to recall through the haze of 14 years. "You asked if I was all right. And then I said I would stand beside you," James continued. "That was a promise I made in a moment without really thinking about what it would mean. But Helena, it has been the most important promise I have ever kept. Standing beside you through everything we have faced, everything we have built, every joy and every challenge. That is what has made my life meaningful." Helena felt tears spring to her eyes, even after all these years, still moved by her husband's words. "You have kept that promise every single day, James. You have stood beside me through 4 pregnancies, through late nights with sick children, through droughts and hard winters and lean times. You have stood beside me through everything, and I hope you know that I have stood beside you too. I do know, James assured her. We stand together. That is what marriage is supposed to be, I think. Not one person in front and the other following, but two people side by side, facing whatever comes together. I love you, Helena said simply. I have loved you since you first smiled at me on those chapel steps and made me feel like maybe everything would be all right after all. And I will love you until my last breath and beyond. James kissed her there beside the river, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. It was not their first kiss or their 1000th, but it held all the weight and sweetness of their years together, all the promises kept, and the love that had only deepened with time. When they returned to the ranch, they were greeted with chaos as all 4 children rushed to meet them, talking over each other in their excitement to share everything that had happened in the 2 days their parents had been gone. James caught Jimmy as he launched himself at his father, while Joey helped his mother down from the wagon with a courtliness that made her heart swell with pride. Grace held back slightly, ever the quieter one, but her smile was brilliant as she took her mother's hand. Jacob was already chattering about the new foal that had been born while they were away, and could they please go see it right now? All right, James laughed, setting Jimmy down. Let your mother catch her breath, and then we will all go see this miraculous foal. That night, after the children were finally settled in their beds and the house was quiet, James and Helena stood in the doorway of their home, looking out at the land they had built their life on. The ranch had grown over the years, expanded and prospered through their hard work and dedication. But more important than any material success was the family they had created, the love they had nurtured, the life they had built together. Thank you, Helena said softly. For what? James asked, puzzled. For stopping that day. For seeing me when you could have just ridden past. For choosing to stand beside me when you had no reason to. For loving me so completely and so well. For giving me this life. James wrapped his arms around her, pulling her back against his chest. Helena, I am the one who should be thanking you. I was just drifting before you, moving from place to place with no real purpose. You gave me a home. You gave me a reason to put down roots to build something lasting. You gave me everything. They stood there together, wrapped in each other's arms, and Helena thought about the scared, humiliated woman she had been on those chapel steps 15 years ago. That woman could never have imagined this life, this love, this joy. She had thought her world was ending, but it had really been beginning, and the beginning had come in the form of a dusty cowboy who had simply said, I will stand beside you. The years continued to pass, marked by the milestones that make up a life well lived. Joey grew into a fine young man who inherited his father's way with horses and his mother's sharp mind. He eventually took over much of the horse training operation, allowing James to slow down slightly as age began to touch his joints with arthritis. Grace became a teacher like her mother, taking over the ranch school and expanding it to include children from town as well. The twins, predictably, went into business together, starting a freight company that hauled goods between Gonzales and San Antonio. James and Helena grew older together, silver threading through their hair and lines deepening around their eyes. But those lines were from laughter more than sorrow, and the silver was earned through years of joy and love. They remained partners in every sense of the word, still working together, still sitting on their porch each evening, still finding joy in each other's company after more than 25 years of marriage. In the spring of 1903, Joey announced his engagement to a sweet-natured girl named Emily from a neighboring ranch. The wedding was set for June, and Helena threw herself into the preparations with the enthusiasm of a woman who had waited a long time to see her eldest child married. On the day of the wedding, as Helena helped Joey straighten his tie before the ceremony, he looked at her with serious eyes. "Mama, I want to ask you something. When you married Papa, how did you know he was the right one? After everything that had happened with your first engagement, how did you trust your heart again?" Helena smiled, thinking back to that long-ago day. "Your father taught me something important, Joey. He taught me that love is not about grand gestures or pretty words. It is about showing up, about standing beside someone even when it is hard, about choosing each other every single day. When your father offered to stand beside me on those chapel steps, he was not offering me anything except his presence and his support. But that turned out to be everything I needed. If Emily is the kind of woman who makes you want to show up for her every day, who makes you want to stand beside her through whatever life brings, then she is the right one." Joey hugged his mother tightly. "Thank you, Mama. And thank you for showing me what real love looks like. You and Papa, you have given us kids a wonderful example to follow." The wedding was beautiful, held not at the chapel in town but on the ranch, under the wide Texas sky that had witnessed so much of the Ashford family's life. As James walked Joey's bride down the aisle, Helena's eyes met her husband's, and in that glance, they shared a lifetime of memories and love. That evening, after the celebration had wound down and most of the guests had departed, James and Helena walked hand in hand to the original small house they had lived in when they first married. It had been expanded over the years, but the core remained the same. They sat on the porch, Helena's head on James's shoulder, just as they had done countless times before. "Our boy is married," James said wonderingly. "How did we get old enough to have a married son?" "Time moves faster than we realize," Helena replied. "It seems like yesterday he was taking his first steps in the corral. Now he is starting his own life, his own family." "We did well with them, did we not?" James asked, seeking reassurance. "Our children, they are good people, kind and honest and hardworking." "We did very well," Helena confirmed. "And they are good people because they had you as an example. You showed them what it means to be a man of integrity and honor. You showed them how to love fully and well." James squeezed her hand gently. "We showed them together, Helena. Everything we did together. That was always our strength." As the stars came out one by one, painting the sky with their ancient light, James and Helena Ashford sat together in the peaceful contentment that comes from a life well lived and love well spent. They had weathered storms and celebrated victories, raised children and built a legacy, but more than any of that, they had loved each other with a constancy and depth that had only grown stronger with the years. More grandchildren came in the years that followed. Joey and Emily had 3 sons in quick succession, keeping Helena busy with visits and babysitting. Grace married a school teacher from Austin, and they had twin girls who were the image of their grandmother at that age. Jacob started a family with a fiery redhead named Molly who kept him on his toes, and they had a daughter and 2 sons. Jimmy was the last to marry, choosing a quiet girl named Sarah who turned out to have a spine of steel beneath her gentle demeanor. The Ashford family gatherings became legendary, with so many people crammed into the expanded ranch house that they spilled out onto the porch and into the yard. James, now in his 60s, would hold court with his grandchildren, telling them stories of the old days and teaching them about horses with the same patience he had once shown their parents. Helena organized everything with the efficiency of a general, making sure everyone was fed and happy, and that the chaos never quite descended into actual disorder. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1918, The whole family gathered for a celebration that became the talk of Gonzales for months afterward. Joey had secretly arranged for the chapel to be decorated, and he convinced his parents to come into town under the pretense of attending a town council meeting. When James and Helena walked into the chapel, they found it filled with family, friends, and neighbors, all there to celebrate the love story that had started on those very steps 40 years earlier. The children had hung photos on the walls, chronicling 4 decades of life and love, from their simple wedding day to pictures of all their children and grandchildren. Reverend Walsh's successor, a young minister named Reverend Thomas, asked James and Helena to stand at the altar where they had exchanged vows 40 years before. Then, in front of everyone who loved them, he asked them to renew their vows. James took Helena's hands, looking into the blue eyes that had captivated him 4 decades ago, and still had the power to make his heart race. The years had changed them both, adding silver and lines and softness where there had once been sharp edges, but the love in Helena's eyes was the same as it had been on their wedding day. Deeper, perhaps, and richer, but fundamentally unchanged. "Helena," James said, his voice steady despite the emotion that threatened to overwhelm him, 40 years ago, I made you a promise. I promised to stand beside you through everything life brought us. And Helena, keeping that promise has been the greatest joy of my life. You have been my partner, my best friend, my love, and my home. You have given me children who make me proud and a life that has exceeded my wildest dreams. If I could go back to that day when I first saw you on these chapel steps, I would not change a single thing because every moment has led us here. I love you more today than I did 40 years ago, and I will love you with my last breath and beyond." Helena was crying now, happy tears that spilled down her cheeks unchecked. "James, when you offered to stand beside me that day, you saved me, not just from the humiliation of being abandoned, but from a life that would have been safe and comfortable but never truly happy. You showed me what real love looks like, what real partnership means. You have stood beside me through 4 children, through the joys and sorrows of 40 years, through everything. And I have stood beside you, gladly and gratefully, because there is nowhere else I would rather be than by your side. I love you, James Ashford. I have loved you since the moment you smiled at me and told me everything would be all right, and I will love you forever." There was not a dry eye in the chapel as they kissed, sealing their renewed vows with the same love and commitment that had sustained them for 4 decades. The celebration that followed was joyous and loud, with music and dancing and enough food to feed half of Gonzales. As the evening wore on and James and Helena danced together, moving slowly to a waltz played by a small band Joey had hired, Helena looked up at her husband with a soft smile. 40 years, she marveled. Has it really been 40 years? 40 years, James confirmed. And if I have another 40, I will spend every day of them loving you. That is a beautiful sentiment, Helena said, but I do not think either of us has 40 more years in us. James laughed, pulling her closer. Then I will love you for whatever time we have, and I will meet you on the other side of forever, where we can start all over again. They continued to dance, surrounded by their family and friends in the chapel where their story had begun, and Helena felt a contentment so complete it was almost overwhelming. This was what happiness looked like, she thought. Not the absence of pain or struggle, but the presence of love so strong it transformed everything it touched. The years after the anniversary celebration slowed down, as if time itself was granting James and Helena a gift. They spent their days in quiet companionship, still working with the horses though at a gentler pace, still sitting on their porch each evening, still finding joy in the simple act of being together. James's health began to decline in 1920, his heart growing weaker despite the doctor's best efforts. He kept it from Helena for as long as he could, not wanting to worry her, but she knew him too well to be fooled. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard, Helena took his hand. "You are not well," she said quietly. "And do not try to deny it, James Ashford. I have known you for 42 years. I know when you are hiding something." James sighed, defeated and relieved in equal measure. "The doctor says my heart is giving out. He does not know how long I have. Could be months, could be years. There is nothing to be done about it." Helena's grip on his hand tightened, but she did not cry, not yet. "Then we will make the most of whatever time we have," she said firmly, "just as we always have." "I am not afraid of dying," James said softly, "but I am afraid of leaving you. The thought of you being alone, of not being here to stand beside you, it breaks my heart more than any physical ailment could." "You will never truly leave me," Helena said, reaching up to touch his face gently. "You are in every breath I take, every beat of my heart. You are woven into the fabric of who I am. Even when you are gone, you will still be with me." "Helena Kensington Ashford," James said, his voice rough with emotion, "you are the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I have ever known. Promise me something, anything. Promise me that when I am gone, you will not just exist. You will live. You will laugh and love and find joy. You will not let grief consume you. You have too much light in you to let it be extinguished." Helena could not stop the tears now. "I promise," she whispered. "But you have to promise me something too. Promise me that wherever you go, you will wait for me, because I do not want to spend eternity without you." "I promise," James said, pulling her close and holding her against his heart, which beat steadily despite its weakness. "I will wait for you, Helena. On the other side of forever, I will be waiting." James lived for another 2 years, growing gradually weaker but never losing his spirit or his love for his family. He spent his days surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of whom adored him and treasured every moment they had with him. He told stories, dispensed wisdom, and loved fiercely until the very end. On a warm June evening in 1922, 44 years after he had first seen a beautiful woman in a wedding dress standing on chapel steps, James Ashford took his last breath with Helena's hand in his, surrounded by their family. His last words were simple and true. "I love you, Helena. Thank you for saying yes." And then he was gone. The grief was overwhelming, a crushing weight that threatened to pull Helena under. But she had made him a promise, and Helena Kensington Ashford was a woman who kept her promises. She mourned, deeply and truly, but she did not let the grief consume her. She lived as James had asked her to. She laughed with her grandchildren, worked with the horses, and found small joys in each day. She wore his ring on a chain around her neck, along with her own wedding band, keeping him close to her heart. And every evening she sat on their porch, an empty chair beside her, and talked to him as if he was still there. Because in all the ways that mattered, he was. Helena lived for another 8 years, years filled with family and love, and the knowledge that she had been blessed beyond measure. When her time came, in the spring of 1930, she went peacefully in her sleep, a smile on her face and James's name on her lips. They buried her beside him in the small cemetery outside Gonzales, under a sky that stretched wide and blue overhead. Their grandchildren told stories at the funeral, remembering not with sadness but with joy, celebrating 2 lives well lived and a love that had changed everyone it touched. The ranch continued on, passed down through the family as James and Helena had always planned. Joey's eldest son took over the operation, maintaining the traditions his grandparents had established while adapting to new times. The Ashford name remained synonymous with integrity, quality, and the kind of enduring love that inspired others. In Gonzales, the story of James and Helena became a legend, passed down from generation to generation. The chapel where they met, married, and renewed their vows became a landmark, with a small plaque installed by the town in 1945 commemorating their story. Young couples would visit, hoping that some of that legendary love would bless their own relationships. And every so often, when the light hit the chapel steps just right, local folks would swear they could see two figures there, a tall cowboy in a worn Stetson and a beautiful woman in a wedding dress, standing together as they had always done. Hand in hand, side by side, together for all eternity. Because some promises, once made with a true heart, are never broken. Not by time, not by death, not by anything. And the promise James Ashford made to Helena Kensington on a hot June day in 1878 when he said, "I will stand beside you," was exactly that kind of promise. One that transcended everything and lasted forever. The story of she who was abandoned at the chapel steps and the passing cowboy who said, "I will stand beside you," became more than just a local legend. It became a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of true love, and the beauty of two souls who chose each other every single day for 44 years. It reminded people that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to the best things that will ever happen to us, if only we are brave enough to walk through them with someone who truly sees us. And in the end, that was what James and Helena had given each other and everyone who knew them. The gift of being truly seen, truly known, and truly loved, not despite their flaws and fears, but including them. They had built a life on a foundation of that one simple promise to stand beside each other, and it had been enough. More than enough. It had been everything.